planned for you is to excite you on a different facet of the new research angle on the AI, which is green AI. So you may be wondering, what is this green AI? So I'll try to see what is green AI and why we are talking about it at this stage. And then as a researcher or as a future developers, what are the key takeaways which you can see from this? So that's what the talk about. And then I'm trying to give my experience in last 15 years of working in IoT and AI. It's a combination of that, those topics of IoT and AI. So that's where I will try to deep dive. And the agenda I have for today is as follows. And roughly I'll speak for maybe 35-40 minutes. And then if you have questions in between also, feel free to interrupt. Otherwise, at least we'll give you 10 minutes to at the end as well. So what I planned here is to motivate you on what is green AI and what are the different optimizations in the green AI when we talk about. And I don't want to leave you at the 10,000 feet level. So I want to share some of the experiments what we have worked on, taking the background of the healthcare models and show you and excite you. Yes, is it really possible to get this kind of acceleration of the inference, right? And as a developer, how do you take advantage of the latest developments which is happening in this data science AI world? And I will try to conclude with a framework. It's not, the framework means doesn't mean that something like a TensorFlow or a PyTorch kind of a framework, but plaster plus set. What does that mean? It's a kind of an acronym. So which I am advocating on top of or getting inspiration from NVIDIA CEO. So how you get benefit from there to develop some models on the green AI. So if you go further on that, the first point of that, how is the motivation for AI? So if you see here, we are keep hearing AI, machine learning, deep learning. These are becoming so much buzzwords. And being students in the Crest University or being in the researchers in this field, I'm sure the basics, fundamental building blocks already you know. That's what my assumption at this stage, so that you can get really benefit from this particular talk. So when we say, do we really train from the model from the scratch as we speak in 2021? So take any of the classification, regression, any of the models what you are trying to solve, right? So try to see, question yourself if you are trying to, yes, there is an interesting research problem, interesting business problem you are trying to solve, but to solve that or maybe to train a model, do we need to really start from scratch? That's one question which you need to trigger in your mind. And second thing is accuracy only the metric? While you are trying to deploy models, maybe you may argue, Sunil, apart from accuracy, maybe sensitivity, specificity, we learned a lot of things in the university. No, I'm not talking on those mathematical things. Can we think of something on the energy efficiency or something on the overall development cost of the model? So those things, to be frank, are not the top areas of concern maybe a few years ago, because that time we are still trying to prove, can AI solve really the problems? Right now, we are in a stage where we are agreeing maybe some verticals like healthcare or maybe the retail, or some of them are in advanced stage compared to the other ones in the verticals. But more or less in day in and day out, you are seeing real world applications of AI, right? So that's where we are talking about the new facet of AI, which is green AI, where target environment is different from training. What does that mean? Right? So maybe you are using GPUs or TPUs, a lot of compute power, right, from the cloud when you are using. But when you are trying to deploy it, if I say or make a statement, you can run your machine learning models in a mobile right now. If I say that, how many people really accept that? Right? So that's what those edge AI. So edge means that it did not be the environment of the target environment. That means where really the models are going to run. Once all the hard work of the data scientists or engineers or the researchers, once they built a efficient model, it's not like going to be run only in the cloud environment, right? Just think of it, where you need to I will give you a real examples as well when I talk about deep dive on it. But these are the things which you need to question. So each of them can turn into a research problem, but these are the things to question ourselves, so that we are convinced, yes, this is what green AI is, this is the potential, and then we can think of how we can really solve and what kind of problems we can really take it into a research or from the development aspect, right? So that's the excitement coming from the building the sustainable models. right? And there are a lot of buzzwords you will hear, something like edge AI, robust AI, trusted AI, each of them trying to address from different angle, but ultimately we are trying to build some secure, sustainable models at the end. In this talk, I'm not covering much on the security in the interest of time, but we are talking about more on the energy efficient models. Another red AI equation, what does that mean is I have given reference when somebody used what does that red AI means, right? So if you see the cost of processing, that means the developing of the model depend on multiple parameters. One parameter is, let's say, what problems to solve, maybe some classification of chest x-ray for COVID, or building some forecasting model for a product, right? And how complex the problem is, and what is the size of data set. In one case, what I'm going to show, I have millions of variable or millions of let's say the images in that particular case, because the image is the input, right? It depends on how big is the data set, the number of hyperparameter experiments we are trying to see. Maybe it is a machine learning or a deep learning. How many different experiments I need to run? Maybe to develop a model, we take 6 months, right? Even on the powerful GPUs, we used to run over the weekend 24/7, right? So you might have heard of even the burnout of these GPUs when it is completely overloaded, right? So it costing a lot of energy. Right now, we are not talking on that. We are talking about only the end goal of how accurate my model is, right? And sometimes we may be taking, if the target deployment environment is maybe less compute heavy, why we need to get a complex models like hundreds of layers? Why can't we solve with a less number of layers? These are the research areas as we speak in 2020 onwards, right? This is getting momentum only in the recent past. So how much of compute, train and inference phases really demand? Okay, sometimes let's say always we are not targeting 100% accuracy. See the models which you developed or the papers which you presented in different scenarios. Sometimes there is a requirement of 99.999, okay, 5 nines, but not all the case in the real world. Sometimes even if I get a 95% accuracy, it isn't enough. Maybe if I reduce the model footprint, maybe I'm compromise on 0.5 or 1%, but still maybe good enough by keeping all the environment parameters intact. That's the motivation for green AI. Let me tell you on interesting point. Okay, so let me substantiate my point by saying what we are talking about is from a paper, research paper from last 7-8 years. With the development of this deep learning, there is almost tremendous increase, 3 lakh x increase in the compute power over the 6 years, right? Maybe some may argue right from AlexNet, if you're coming from that background, you just worry about these terms, otherwise not to worry, right? If you're coming from computer vision, deep learning, you will really understand these terms. But my intention to show here is number of petaflops for the training, what it is taking, which is tremendously increasing, right? So that's where this gigantic number is coming into picture, 3 lakh x increase, right, over the to build the models. Maybe someone may argue, yes, we are able to increase the accuracy over the time. Yes, perfectly fine. But if you're trying to deploy the models, maybe in a target environment like a mobile, or maybe an end terminal, or maybe a drone image, or a CCTV camera, or webcam. So these are all the different edge devices which we people are talking about. If that is the target environment, do we need to really build the complex model right from the scratch, or can we do some kind of optimization from the beginning? Okay, so those are the thought process which I'm trying to deep dive now, so that you can think the end goal, or maybe the key takeaways from this is how you can, as a developer, as a researcher, think these kind of parameters in mind, and you don't require to start from scratch, even those kind of development aspects, right? There are a lot of things happening, and you need to take the advantage of that and then identify the gaps to solve from your side. So effectively, the green AI is treating efficiency along with accuracy as a primary evaluation criteria, right? That's where the term green is coming, right? To build the energy efficient models. Okay, how it can really happen? Yes, we are trying to define what it is, but how it can really happen, right? There are multiple, I'm talking about 7 different points, and then trying to deep dive on some of them in today's talk. So first one is making efficiency and as an evaluation criteria, okay, along with accuracy. That's an easy one, but easy one in the sense that at least while you are trying to evaluate the model, and maybe in the life cycle point, data science life cycle, keep, because the evaluation criteria is very important one, keep efficiency along with the accuracy. That may be one mindset to start with. Then the edge AI, which is a separate paradigm, which is very connected to the green AI. What does that edge AI means? It's a convergence of Internet of Things and AI. Okay, so there's a lot of hype on IoT. When I was working in 2007 time frame, even I have a lot of patents, papers, and solutions built on IoT. But we are expecting that time within 10 years it's going to change the world, IoT, right? But after 10 years, when I see, yes, it changed, but not to the extent of hype which was created. And IoT and AI coming hand in hand these days, right? That's what I can say, because AI need a lot of data, maybe IoT is providing. At the same time, IoT systems need some return on investment, so it is not just collection of data like the sensor data or IoT parameter data, but what we need to do, some kind of a decision making, some kind of activation, that AI or data science are helping in that. Another way to look at it is on the edge of a network to minimize the latency and bandwidth needs. What does that mean is, why somebody is talking about edge AI when I have powerful compute at maybe at the disposal for me as GPU, CPU, TPUs kind of a thing, right, in the cloud? Because when we are trying to analyze something close to the data generator, so where the data is coming from, data is not coming from the cloud, right? Data is coming from the real world field, be it agriculture, be it retail hotspots, right? So from there, for analysis, we are shipping it to the cloud and doing it, right? So some of the applications we don't require to share everything there. Some kind of analysis can be done at the edge, right? Some kind of decision making that gives us minimize the latency, and then take care of some kind of a security and privacy because we are closer to the data point, right? So these are advantages while we are thinking of edge AI. Then another angle to look at is, because the deep learning is democratized, and it is, people are talking about advocating for the reproducibility. So take example of this. So maybe if you're not aware, just make a note of it. There is something like paperswithcode.com. You just Google it, you will get it, right? So there you see hundreds of papers, right? And slowly going to thousands of papers with the paper and the real implementation as well, right? And it give maybe with a GitHub code link and all. So what we are talking, the research is completely changing these days. Initially, maybe even at a general level paper or a good conference, they don't demand an implementation, right? They trust, and then they evaluate from the different angle whether you are really done that or not. But nowadays, maybe to democratize the deep learning or to the reproducibility mindset, some of the conferences, top conferences like NIPS, is advertised, maybe enforcing, yes, please share the code as well along with the results, right? That is one way to look at. Or there are people voluntarily sharing, let's say paperswithcode.com has a lot of these collection of it, and it has even 3,000 plus data sets for you to really play with that, right? So what is helping us on this, right? So we are talking about not from starting from scratch, so we can have a lot of the building blocks already, and which can save a lot of compute power, a lot of time and effort from our side to build it. One way to look at is transfer learning, right? This very standard term in the deep learning, so many of you might be familiar with this, maybe as part of the course also people teach, but we are talking about some more new developments in the transfer learning while you are trying to take the advantage of these deep learning models. Then we are going to deep dive on what kind of optimizations we can see both from training and inference. Some of them maybe we can take efficiency, this transfer learning and all during the training phase, right? And even in the inference, we can have some more optimizations which can help us to go to the next level, right? To build the energy efficient models. We'll talk about that. And we are seeing the latest developments on increase in the hardware performance that giving us some scope to really, and what we are trying to advocate here is not always a software kind of optimizations, right? So our colleagues from and communication or other departments who build this hardware are also playing the key role in achieving this kind of a green AI. It's kind of a software plus hardware kind of an efforts from our side. So if you see here, the optimization point of it, the key is to optimize the power efficiency, and how maybe reduce the number of operations to increase the throughput. There are multiple ways to define the problem. This is one way to I'm trying to talk about, right? So let me tell you some interesting developments in recent past on how these optimizations include. As I mentioned, it's both software side and the hardware side as well, right? So you may ask, Do I need to really worry about all these optimizations and do myself? No, not really. Just be aware that a lot of these developments are happening, maybe based on your hardware. Let's say you are not an hardware expert, for instance, not to worry at all. So there are a lot of packages. Let's say you are running models on your Intel CPU, for instance, at the end. Yes, there is an Intel OpenVINO package or on an NVIDIA GPU or ARM packages. You are trying to run on some kind of hardware, right? So these kind of optimizations more or less there as a standard packages now. When we developed maybe a couple of years ago, they are not like a plug and play. We worked with some of results I'll show it to you during my journey with Phil, closely associated with Intel, and during the beta version of Intel OpenVINO, we were part of what kind of prioritizations which will make the world to get really benefit, and then what kind of optimizations we can do. So now all those resulted into some kind of packages which are readily available for you as a developer or as a researcher. If you see that some of the examples like quantization, what does that mean? Quantization means maybe I'm getting some ping. Is it some kind of a charts? No, not charts. Are you able to follow me so far? Is the audio video clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, sure. In between this, more like a health checks. Otherwise, I may be speaking to the screen without, or maybe thinking that you are all listening, but there may be some issues. Okay, thanks. So these optimizations include, I just put the subset of it, right? It's not like Nomare, it's a complete ones, but in the interest of time, I can excite you on few of them. For instance, quantization. What does that mean? We all know the computers work on floating point 32, floating point 16 and all, right? When we really have these weight matrices or activation kind of a, maybe the big matrices and all, so mostly they are stored in by default, maybe floating point 16, floating point 32. But if you try to do maybe int 8, maybe a fixed point instead of floating point, it can save a lot of compute, right? But at the same time, just for the sake of building this energy efficient model, you don't want to compromise on the quality, right? So that's why maybe this is not done in the beginning, but let's try to use the standard process. But there are ways to convert that into the aspect of fixed point quantizations where we can get 4x depending on how much, let's say floating point 32 to 8, maybe how much of computation efficiency you can get while during the inference time, right? But not compromising on the accuracy too much. There may be a small drop definitely, but is the drop within the permissible limits, like within 1%, within 0.5 for that particular application? Node merging, what does that mean? Taking the example of, in this case, I am taking next to few slides, example of computer vision, right? Because we can't cover all the applications. I'm trying to give some examples on computer vision where most of you can connect to. So it's more like healthcare, a generic healthcare kind of applications. But these kind of optimizations or GreenEye is not limited to only the computer vision. That's the message, right? So if you see node merging, maybe we have a lot of different nodes, and maybe you may think of something like a dropout kind of a thing already there. But here, how can we merge the nodes so that we can reduce the size of the model, right? And even horizontal fusion, maybe a little advanced version. If you're really familiar with something like a ResNet or 1x1 convolutions, that time you may be really going deep into that. But at this stage, if you're not that far in understanding the deep learning, but just think of it, maybe vertically we can have some merging, or even horizontally you can have a fusion. And there is some batch normalization, maybe as a standard practice people do, but we can eliminate during the inference, which is not adding extra value. Another simple thing which you can understand easily is a constant folding. So we have constants and variables, right? So sometimes you understand the compile time and runtime. So if you keep something at the compile time ready, then runtime you can improve the efficiency, right? As a common sense point. So those are the things which people try to do at the hardware level as well. Then some fast convolutions. So maybe one example is Vinograd convolution. Maybe they claim 2x improvement you will get from there. Like that, there are a lot of these convolutions which people try to code and maybe get the inspiration from open source and try to add to their packages, right? So if you see this, these are, I mean, 1 or 2 points I'm explaining in deep as well, but these have software and hardware side of angle as well. And if I take a backdrop of that, to take example of a computer vision, it's not like I built a model from the beginning and try to do an acceleration towards the end, because there are some packages available like Intel OpenVINO or NVIDIA Tensor RT. Okay, so but what we are advocating now is don't expect everything will come from the hardware acceleration only. You think from the beginning, network design, right? If you know an end goal is trying to have maybe building a model, let's say simple classification of a COVID-19 chest X-ray or maybe COVID-19 CT scan, right? It's a simple example and a very real world example as we speak now. Maybe you are collecting some data. Then when you are trying to design, are we trying to run those models at the end terminal in a hospital or maybe in a mobile device or on the cloud? Based on that, you can take the network design. Don't take a complex model even to use the transfer learning at the beginning. Those are the things which we are talking from the architectural point. Use the right set of convolution filters. Maybe optimized operations are available. Once you have the network design fitting for the end goal, then think of some kind of a post processing. There are a lot of model compression techniques, some kind of a knowledge distillation, maybe one example of a transfer learning, right? So once you build those things, then further optimizations you can think on the hardware acceleration. Right? So there are a lot of acronyms like this. If you're not completely familiar, don't worry on that. Get the key message. There is a need for the researchers or the developer to think from the beginning how efficiently you can build the model, right? What will be the right choice? It's not like always the latest one, greatest one will be the maybe the choice for us. Okay, maybe few years ago, somebody might have developed a mobile net. That may be good enough for you, right? See, and there is no like universal best model which you can choose. It always depending on the characteristics of the application you and me are going to develop. So if you go a little more into the model compression, I'm taking 2-3 examples where you can really relate. For instance, model compression, as the name indicates, I have a model now, but I want to reduce the size of it. Okay, I took in a best care of it and what is based on the network design, and now I reach it here. So the basic idea here is not all parameters are equally contributing to the inference. There are always, let's say, just like in the brain, there are so many neurons, but all may not fire at the same time, right? So if you see that there are some interesting weights which we will see, and there are other ones which are not very important. Like maybe you can have a threshold below that, maybe keep it 0. It will become a sparse matrix. You can efficiently compute by using some matrix computation techniques. That's why I'm compressing the model, right? Or you can go with a ranking of the neurons, maybe by following some kind of a mean of weights, the mean of activations. There are multiple mathematical models, but the key idea you get it, right? This is called a pruning. Right, there is a paper. It's not a very new technique, but at the same time, it is giving us a lot of computational efficiency by way of model compression. Another way to look at is knowledge distillation. Right. So in this knowledge distillation, what we are talking is the Geoffrey Hinton, who is the father of this deep learning. It's not a new one from him, but he proposed in 2015. But recent past, people are taking it. Just like teacher students, you are getting a lot of things from your teachers and professors, right? So similarly here also, when we are talking about a training data, there is already a pre-trained model who is acting as a teacher, and those labels we are taking from the distilling of the knowledge, which we are using from our predictions for the model to be trained, so that effectively the loss function, when you are making it, it has soft labels from the teacher and predictions from the student as well. So it's one way of a transfer learning, you can say. So to maybe first 15-20 minutes, I try to get it at a high level view. What is really a green AI and how it really can achieve, right? And then what are the different optimizations and different model compression things? What are the design techniques? Those are the first key takeaways from the talk. Then to supplement my argument, I'm not just talking on the air. And when we developed these kind of things in the research problems, I'm trying to show you some results to you, which are public in and there are reference links I have given, so that yes, you can really excite. Yes, it is really possible to get this kind of an acceleration of the inference model. Then towards the end, I'll convert. Okay, Sunil, you developed for your models, but what will be there for me as a developer if I want to see that, right? We'll talk on that front, so that wherever, whatever the models you are building, not on this exact models, you can get benefit of that. So if you see that I'm taking the example of two models, one simple model of a bone age prediction model and maybe a complex model of lung segmentation. The backdrop here is how we are getting that increase in the performance, right? What is the performance parameter? Performance parameter for us is number of images per second I can process. In simple words, let's say I deployed a model in my mobile. Maybe I can process 1 image per second or 2 images per second. If I use some kind of optimizations, can I increase to 10 images per second or 20 images per second to process? Is it really possible that way? Yes. Without much compromising on the accuracy? Yes. We are trying to show you the real results, and maybe sometimes you will see, wow, is it really possible to get those many, right? So let's see those. And the backdrop of that is I already have trained models, and actually we experimented more than 5 to 6 models, but I'm presenting results from 2 of them. So it can be a classification model, regression model, and what the hardware we use, not the mobile environment, but maybe an Intel CPU kind of an environment to experiment, right? So maybe if you take a little less compute heavy kind of a webcam and all, you may not get that much, maybe 100x, 50x, but you will definitely get some improvement if you really do the optimizations. Okay. So we used all this in the Intel OpenVINO. So what is this OpenVINO? Some kind of optimization group put together from Intel. So you can just Google it. Nowadays, it is how simple is that is within half day, that is within 3 to 4 hours, you will be able to download that Intel OpenVINO and try to run some real examples. That much plug and play as we speak in 2021, right? So there are a lot of complex things what will happen there, but what I'm presenting it to you with a reference link here is once you have a trained model, that can be a Caffe model, PyTorch model, or a TensorFlow model, right? So you are trying to convert that into a intermediate representation using model optimizer. IR is standing for intermediate representation. What does that mean is these are converted to .xml and .bin. Maybe if you see, if someone asks you, what is an output of really a deep learning model? It's architecture and weights of that, right? So architecture is structured in the XML form and the weights are in the .bin form. So by way of that, we are trying to get a inference engine where if somebody asks from the user application, instead of taking the versional model, we are talking about the IR model, which can efficiently run using the underlying hardware. Right? It's not like a general solution. If you are talking about maybe another Tensor RT from NVIDIA, maybe some optimizations from there you need to take care, right? So depending really on the hardware, underlying hardware, to get the best use of that. That's the idea. So I'll show you some results from 2 models, bone age prediction model and lung segmentation. The prediction model is a simple regression model. So how you see this is it's a simple X-ray of the wrist. And what is the background for why somebody is interested in a bone age? Right. So if you see that, especially in maybe developing countries or maybe African kind of countries, the growth of the maybe the kids, right? Maybe because of malnutrition, because of their growth disorders, not getting the sufficient supplements, the bone age may be less than, right? If the predicted age is less than the actual age, that means some disorders are there. We need to take care of them. So that's the idea there. And it can, if you have the model like this, it can improve the productivity of the radiologist or age assessment by the sports authorities. You know, a lot of these sports authorities also will see, right, your actual age and are you really fit from physically point of it. So there also people use this. I lost the screen sharing.
1 minute, sir.
Hello. Yeah. You're able to follow so far?
Yes, sir.
You may need to share. You may need to give me presenter thing. Then I will share the screen. Yeah. Just confirm if you can see my screen or not. It shared. Is it share? Yeah.
Not yet, sir.
Is it fine now? Is it fine now?
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay, great. I just given the background of the bone age prediction model, why that model is important. And similarly, let me tell you the segmentation model. This is a little complex, just like now you are talking about the lungs becoming so important these days because of the COVID thing, right? But when we developed this model, it is not, the COVID thing is not there. But when we see some kind of a CT scan, all right, we want to take the automatically without any seed point, can the lung be separated even in the complex scenarios, right? Why it is important? It can save a lot of time from the for the radiologist, right? So a lot of deep learning models are taking place because now you see the importance of that lungs. Everybody now, when affected by the COVID, the first question we're asking is how much is really the effect? Maybe 10%, 15%, 20%. Based on that, they need to admit to the ICU, right? So lung segmentation is very important at this stage as well. So if you go into the details of it, my aim is not to go into the details how we developed and all, but it is a complex model of maybe 51 layers. Okay, where if you give the lung slice from the CT scan and there is a ground truth mask, and we are trying to, both of them are supervised models, right? We developed it, and then once we developed the model, we went into all this DLDT, MKLD, and don't worry on those acronyms. Those are all some kind of a plugins from the Intel OpenWinnow. Using those, I'm able to reduce the number of layers, right? And if you see here the results, right, to excite, if you are interested, you can go to the paper and see that. But how we are able to get the optimization, we'll talk, but just focus on the for graphs what we am giving there. For the first model, maybe with the baseline, what does that mean is we are able to process one or two images in that particular Intel Xeon processors, right? That means one image at a time, I can predict a bone age. But if you use the Intel OpenWinnow toolkit, all the optimizations we talked about, right? So some of them are listed here, or we talked a few minutes ago, we are able to increase by 35x, okay, or maybe 30x, right? Something up to 75 images we are able to process. And now there is another possibility. Now multiple instances of Intel OpenWinnow we can use, so that the parallel processing, multi-core, really, if you're talking about 40 core, 48 core machine or 24 core machine, can we really use it? Sometimes, if we are not, sometimes cores are available, but our application is not scalable to the parallel processing. That's where all the CUDA and other things are coming, right? Parallel processing paradigms. If you use those kind of parallel multiple instances, we have potential till 267 images. See the difference, up to 2 images to almost like 260 images per second we are able to process. But in all applications, are we able to go till that level? Need not be. That's the reason I'm trying to show another complex model, maybe up to 2 images for baseline. Maybe with the OpenWinnow toolkit, we are able to go up to 14, and then finally we went up to 37 images or slices, right? Or frames per second, whatever you call. Ultimately, the aim here is to talk about the potential optimizations what are happening, maybe by node merging, batch normalization, elimination, constant folding, horizontal fusion, these are all not new. Few minutes ago we talked about, but I'm trying to supplement whatever I talked with a result from this, so that you can also think of your models and how efficiently you can build it, right? So now to just show it to you some more things. Nowadays, it's not like GPU or a CPU kind. Maybe you can think of even a small unit like a neural compute stick, like a USB stick also you can think of. Or even in the mobile, these Qualcomm or maybe Apple or Samsung, they're also talking about some parallel processing kind of, or maybe efficient processing of these deep learning models. A lot of chips are coming there. Okay, so it's going to be democratized going forward. That's where we want to really see how can we get benefit from these and build efficient models, right? So now towards the last topic for us is from the view of developers. Now, good, Sunil, you excited us on top of what is Green AI and what is the potential, and supplemented with one example, but that is just one example of healthcare thing. If I want to really do it, right, what are the two things which you can advocate for us? One is, if you see the compute intensive and time critical kind of a thing, and just for your information, I already shared the deck to the organizers. So just concentrate on what is the key takeaways, and then anyway, you can get the deck from the organizers. So if you see there are three things. One is cloud ML, mobile ML, and tiny ML as well. So where to put your really the model? Sometimes people are talking about distributed model aspect as well, distributed AI. That's a little different topic though, but that is really possible because of these different clouds. What does that mean is, at one end, more compute intensive thing is happening on Amazon, Google, or Microsoft Azure, that cloud environment. In the mobile environment, there are something like a PyTorch Mobile, TF Lite. There are versions as of now which you can really develop and then deploy. Okay, ONNX is a really interesting one to worth noting. That is Open Neural Network Exchange. When you have a lot of these frameworks, maybe some things are coming from PyTorch, something coming from Caffe. There are so many things. Maybe as a developer or a researcher, I can't master everything, right? But maybe some optimizations there are one version, one particular framework than other. It is easy now to convert from one to the other, right? When you are really deploying it. These are only the software frameworks to help us really build based on our comfort, but ONNX can exchange the models which developed in one framework to the other. That's an interesting generalization people are talking about. And there are something like a TinyML, especially on the devices like let's say Raspberry Pi or a Jetson Nano board. Maybe Jetson Nano board is $99 kind of a thing, or a $50 kind of a thing. So there people are talking about, can you take that neural stake or Jetson Nano board? Even there people are talking about some embedded ML as well. Right, that's what another TinyML, small operations it can do. Okay. So just be aware of it based on your interest and comfort, and then see how much you can get familiar with that, right? And the last point I'm trying to share in this particular talk is the Plaster plus set. You may be wondering what is this acronym, right? So Plaster, I got inspiration from the NVIDIA CEO in one of the conference. It's an acronym for programmability, latency, accuracy, S for size of the model, throughput, E for energy efficiency, and rate of learning. Okay, what are all these acronyms, right? Why should I care about all that? And now on top of that, I extended it further to security, explainability, and training time, right? So those many parameters, right? But what we are trying to show you, as a developer, as a researcher in the data science world, you need to be familiar with at least these 9. Okay, the 9 or 10 it came to be 4, 7, 10 parameters, right? So, and our life is mostly doing some trade-off, right? For you or for me or for our teams, right? What does that mean? It's not like always a bias variance kind of a trade-off. That may be a very basic one which you see in your textbooks. But we need to do a lot of these trade-offs to really develop a successful solution, not just only from accuracy angle on getting the total cost of ownership is the term I'm using here. Right, because we need to worry about where we are deploying, where we are really how do you really maintain the world. It's not like no more a research thing, develop a model, publish a paper, and that's it, right? So in the real world, that's not happening like that. You should be able to do whatever you published and all that, you should be able to really deploy it, and those challenges you need to take care. Then along with the basic things, then you need to think of the security aspects. And if you're too much secure, maybe one angle to look at is, maybe I will go to the next one. When you say I will make my models more secure, that means it will be difficult to explain. Or on the other hand, if you make the models more explainable, then you are giving a lot of information of the model. It may be subject to the security breaches. So you should have a trade-off to whom you are giving the models, who are the end users. Based on that, you need to give. So those kind of trade-offs. Another trade-off we can think of is throughput and latency. Okay, throughput and latency. If you see that the latency is always a limit. Let's say if you're talking about typing something in Google, within few milliseconds, you are expecting a result. Within that limit, can I maximize the throughput? Correct. So there are always some kind of a trade-offs which you can play with, and I'm just presenting some of them here. For instance, training time and network complexity. If the training time is huge, that I mean, it has a dependency on the network complexity, right? If the network is complex, then training time is more. But maybe if you have a good transfer learning models, even though model is complex, maybe you don't require to start from scratch. Think of those. Then how often I need to make the retraining of the model? Does it has a dependency on the programmability? Because if you deploy some model on a mobile or some edge device, do you need to really take care of the entire life cycle of a retraining and convert it and then push it? How to make it that efficient? Right. So at the end, overall return on investment is important. That's the angle we can think through. Whereas inference per watt, there are small metrics like this, right? That means how much of power you are really consuming to produce this. Okay. So those kind of angle also you can think from the green AI perspective. So if I say the key takeaways here is, I'm trying to excite you on the importance of green AI and what the role the transfer learning is playing in the deep learning. and couple of examples of model compressions and optimizations we talked about. And at the end, from the developer view, what is in by listening to this, by thinking of this green AI, is something like a Plaster Plus framework. What kind of trade-offs you can play with that, right? So with that, let me open for, there are some references which I have given, and I'm open for Q&A. You can use the chat, or you can unmute and speak as well.
So how do you maintain the balance between saving resources for a green impact and the loss of accuracy? Like, how do you find the perfect balance between the two?
Interesting question. So when we talk about these, right, so there is always a so you need to define your evaluation criteria and how much of importance you are giving it to each of them, right? Let's say you, without this green AI angle, what we talk about is, yes, I have some accuracy, and you are familiar with this accuracy, sensitivity, specificity terms in the machine learning. Yes, no.
Yes, sir, somewhat.
Yes, somewhat, right? So that means even accuracy is not the one that is a commonly used in the things, but along with accuracy, there is something like sensitivity, specificity based on your false negatives, false positives kind of a thing, right? Precision, recall, there are multiple other parameters. Even there also, if you see, if you want to keep that accuracy and compromising on sensitivity or one of them, specificity is very common for a machine learning researcher. At the same time, when we are adding another angle, there is no like a perfect balance, but only thing is, let's say what is your, let's say the examples what I given it to you in the bone age prediction model, right? If you see here, to be more precise, we got 96% of accuracy of the bone age prediction model, right? Without these acceleration. When we able to do this kind of accelerations, there is a drop of 1%, up to 1%, not all, even something like 0.9, 0.8%. So which is acceptable by getting this kind of parameters. Let's say if you are able to get this, but if the accuracy is dropped by 5% or 10%, maybe I may not be able to do that much of acceleration. So now then if you do that, maybe all optimizations are not required. Maybe I can pick and choose from there in the packages, and maybe let's say up to 1% I'm able to compromise. Then I may not get maybe 200 to 60. Maybe I'm able to do only few of these optimizations. Maybe I'm stopping at, let's say, 10 images per second, right? So that way you can try to balance out in terms of how much of drop you are able to, okay, that's the minimum threshold. Or if it is a mission critical, I don't want to compromise anything, maybe you have limited scope in the optimization. So it depends on really on the application. So that's where all these trade-offs, and then why I need to be available, maybe aware of all these optimizations is you can pick and choose, right? How much of result you are getting, and maybe first you are talking about all of them. Let's the default optimization, give me something, but it is dropping, let's say 2% of accuracy. Then go one by one and see where really, let's say one of them, maybe horizontal fusion is affecting this. Let's strike it off and then take only other 3-4 which are doing, let's say maybe 0.5% accuracy. That's where really the art than science as of now. What does that mean is there are a lot of optimizations available for us. There's not like a scientific proof like AutoML, which you can automatically take care of all these trade-offs, but your domain knowledge, your experience, and then that's why we as of now also with all these developments, it's still more of a art than science to use all this. Does it answer your point?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Any other questions? If you want me to go back to any particular slide as well, I can go and take that, not an issue.
Sir, there is a question. is OpenVINO free to
Vino,
use
OpenVino.
or any license needed?
Yes. No, perfectly fine. So you just, I can go to, I can show it to you here. Where is this? Just type Intel OpenVINO. You can, there are some versions which are, but for the students and all, you don't require to worry at all. Just go there and then download it. And then there are examples also, which you can, and the similar to the Intel OpenVINO, if you are playing with the GPUs, there is NVIDIA Tensor RT. All these are free to download. Similar optimizations, but based on the hardware kind of a thing. So you can really see that.
Okay,
Yeah.
sir.
So what I mentioned already, some of them you can see here, right? Horizontal fusion we talked about, precision we talked about. Now the weapon we now able to claim they can take multiple inputs and then take it, right? That's where the intermediary optimization I talked about, IR representation. Yeah, they are free to use. And even there are examples as well. That's why I'm able to tell there are enough videos and all in the internet within 3 hours. Let's say within your weekend, you can get your, maybe your model is there. You want to try it out on this. Yes, and that too, mostly people use Intel, at least on your hardwares, right? Try it. And you can see Intel Xeon, what we tried that time, but maybe Intel Core i5 is very common. Core i7 is common for you. i3 is there. Right, you can see what kind of improvements it is able to get your own models. Then you can feel excited. Yes, there is really an optimization going on, whether it's a 2x, 10x, depending on really your model.
Sir, one more question. How we can check the
Yes,
accuracy
please.
of machine learning model when data is dynamic?
Yeah, so data is dynamic means I'll take that question as the distributions are changing. That standard term people use is concept drift. Are you referring on that angle? Maybe the distributions are changing. Is that the point, or something different when you say dynamic?
Varsha, can you send the message what sir is asking and what is your reference for the question?
Yes, I think she responded. Yes. So when the dynamic in the sense, in the technical terms, we call it as a concept drift, model drift. There are a lot of development people are talking about. So let's say I built a model and then same example of, let's say, bone age prediction model, and we have, let's say, African data, and then built a model and claiming, let's say, 96% accuracy. Now, maybe there is a geography change, some other country in Africa or maybe India. When we are trying to test it within that, maybe the accuracy is dropping. All right, so that means what we need to do is the data distributions, whether it's an image or a text or even the time series data, doesn't matter. We can plot the distributions of it, and then there are some kind of a probability techniques or statistical techniques, some divergence of the distributions, probability distributions, standard techniques, right? KL divergence, like that. So once you identify that, if the distribution is too much different, that means you built a model for one distribution type of it, or maybe couple of distributions, you built a model which can work. Now, if you know upfront the distribution is changed, then what we advocate is don't try and waste the resources to see how much accuracy is coming, right? Because the model is not built for this kind of a data. Then the retraining coming into picture. That's where in one plasterer set as well, we talked about how frequently to retrain the model. Why we need to retrain the model? Because the data is changing, maybe in your terms dynamic thing, right? So there is some research, good research happening on the concept drift or a model drift, data drift. These are the terms people use it. Then see how you how quickly you can detect it, and then advocate for the retraining. And do we need to retrain completely from scratch, or how do you handle the samples? With some EDA, if you do that exploratory data analysis, you really know whether it is one-off data during this situation where you need to take it separately and build a separate model, submodel, or if the pattern is completely changing, then completely can I retrain it? So those are the ways people are handling that dynamism of the data, what you are talking. Does it answer your point, Varsha?
Thank you, sir. Sir, there
Okay,
is one
great.
more
Where do
question.
you see Grain AI in the, yeah,
Yes,
yes,
sir.
please.
Yes, sir. Sir, this question is a
This is the
general
same question?
not no, sir. A general
Please.
question. As a
Okay.
data scientist, what are the key tools and techniques we must learn?
Good question. So, so always we are limited by time, right? So I will say that there's no limit in the terms of availability of the resources, or whether you are in maybe because of the pandemic, you are in the rural village or in a city or in a famous university in India, it doesn't matter. You have access to all the tools and techniques here. But that because of the limit in the time, so just go this, I advocate these things, right? I'm just typing also for your reference. Basically, you be strong in ML and DL concepts first, okay? And parallelly, you try to get at least one language, maybe Python. And I can talk Keras plus TensorFlow is the easiest one in the deep learning point, or even PyTorch is also very popular. Okay, so these are the basic things. If you can go there as a basic building blocks for you. I'm familiar with Python. I know understanding of the concepts of, and don't just go by the tool base. What we see in the students these days, or researchers, okay, I'm available. I'm using some toolkit without even understanding what it is. But always there is a balance. You need to understand what is happening. But if you go deep dive, that may take a couple of months for you to go there. Always there is a balance. One, you are learning some concept, and at the same time, you are parallelly trying to apply that, maybe using a GitHub code, right, in the Python. So that's why to get the benefit of that, at least you need to be comfortable with the Python, and then at a deep learning point of it, maybe Keras plus TensorFlow or PyTorch, or I will say one of them is good, or maybe there are 10 frameworks. We won't expect you to be master in all of them, right? There are already techniques like ONNX. Even if you develop in one tool, maybe other tool, it can convert it into. So not to worry on that. Once you have these building blocks, then all these Intel OpenWinnow or maybe the entire tech stack into coming into picture. I'm talking only on the model development now. If you talk about model deployment, there is something like Kubernetes, then ELK stack. Those are things coming later on. Okay, and optimization like Intel OpenWinnow. So just go step by step. Before going to the OpenWinnow, you should understand at least how to build a model first, right? With the Python or a TensorFlow type of it. Then model optimization, you can go into OpenWinnow. If you are really trying to talk about the entire data engineering part, then think of this Kubernetes or ELK stack.
Thank you, sir.
Does it
So
answer your point?
with the yes, sir. Thank you, sir. So one last question, with the interest of time, how
Sure.
is node merging affecting accuracy?
Yeah, so node merging on a case-to-case basis, actually. So it will impact. That means node merging means what is happening. Each and every node merging means what? We have different nodes in the layer, right? In the deep learning, maybe the nodes are in the same layer or in the neighboring layers, right? So when we are talking about merging it, that means you are reducing some kind of weights. If the weights are, let's say, weights carrying with the edges, right? If I remove, let's say, or maybe merge two nodes to one, what does that mean? Two edges are maybe shrink to one. That means two weights which are carrying some information, I'm reducing it to one. So naturally, that means some information loss is there. If that information loss is maybe redundant in the network, you don't see any reduce in the accuracy, right? Or if I'm merging only those things which are really redundant in nature, that's where the key. How do you really identify? If you are talking about merging the key things, then there will be a lot of drop in the accuracy. But if there are a lot of redundant things which are by default the nature in the deep learning, if you're able to closely identify those and merge those, then the drop is not significant. That's why you need to. That's where the technique like this pruning and all will help you there.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Thank you.
and last one I can see from the host, where do you see the green AI in the next few years? So I'm going to maybe with the new names like Edge AI or let's say responsible AI. There are other terminology people are using it, right? So trust AI, trusted AI. So these things are going to take. I'm sure in the next few years these are going to take the center stage for the research funding or maybe for the real deployment, because the basic AI is taking into granted in the real world. So these things are going to be, once you have these things, then only like green AI, all the edge AI and all, then only the democratization really happens, right? So I'm all in for it. That's the reason I took this topic to excite you.
Thank you, sir. That's the last of our questions.
Great.
Thank
So
you,
let
sir,
me
for
take the
opening.
opportunity to thank all the organizers and open back to you. Okay. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, sir, for opening new perspectives of green AI and the vast potential that lays ahead. Also for introducing us to latest industrial developments and research. We now move on to the next keynote speaker.
Thank you.
I
think
would like to
is it
welcome our second keynote
Sudhindra?
speaker.
Next.
So, Ansh, 1 minute. Yes, sir. So our next speaker is Sudhindra, sir.
Oh, okay, great.
Thank you, Sunil, sir.
I would now like to welcome our second keynote speaker for the day, Dr. Sudhindra Kaushik. Dr. Sudhindra Kaushik is an engineering graduate who did his doctorate research in an integrated framework for innovation talent management, which focuses on innovation and entrepreneurship. He has 28 years of experience in innovation and technology management